We're going to talk about something today that is sometimes a little hard to talk about in the church, definitely. And but it's something that so many deal with today, and something that was on the heart of my guest that I have today. And I'm kind of excited about this. You may hear birds in the background, my husband on the tractor, the children playing with the dogs. This is Real Life on the Prairie with Donita Fogelman of PrairieTrail.com, weathering the dust storms of life with God's divine help. And I have with me teacher Patricia. I've had her on before talking about grief, working through grief, and today we're going to discuss divorce and all of the dynamics that go with divorce and blended families. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I appreciate it.
I'm kind of excited about this topic. My parents were divorced whenever I was a baby, and I was a stepchild. And I didn't know that I was a stepchild until I was 8. And I learned that my stepmother was not my real mother. I always knew, but didn't know, I mean, you kind of get a feeling for those things, I think. But whenever they explained it to me, it was such a relief to know that not that I wasn't her child, but that there was a reason why I didn't feel like I was her child, and then getting to meet my mother for the first time. And then I moved in with her when I was 10, and then had stepdads. And so had kind of that whole dynamic there. And with our children, I tried to help prepare them for that thought process of being very careful whenever you start thinking about marriage, and think twice about marrying a divorced person, type of thing, because there are all these dynamics, especially if they have children. And our oldest daughter did end up marrying a divorced man with bonus children. And I think those conversations were very beneficial with her. Anybody who follows Catherine and Okie Dokie Explorers can kind of see some of the things that they do as a family. And I'm very proud of the way she handles it. So, Patricia, what is your take on this and your experience here?
First of all, I didn't realize that it was saying Teacher Patricia there. And then I was like, oh, you were, honoring me by calling me that. But I'm not going to take time to change it now. But I do go by Teacher Patricia because I teach English as a second language online and do other tutoring. But you can sometimes just slip into PJ. My take on divorce is that I reacted right away, or God hit me over the head right away when I saw what was written. You had spoken before about divorce and the number of divorces that are on the prairie and the number of divorces that are started by women. And that really shocked me. And I was led to contact you because I really felt that I had something to say about this. So we'll see where it goes. But I had been married at age 25. I was married for 8 years, had one son, and I ended up getting divorced at the end of those 8 years when my son was just about 3 years old. And the thing that I didn't realize is how much divorce affects children. You think that you're going to be the best divorced mom and dad, and you're going to make sure that the child is loved and knows that they are loved, and it's not their fault, and all those things, all those cliches that people say, but it affects children deeply. And it affected my son deeply, more than I ever knew. But the other part of it is that divorce is something that is really sad. It's like a death. And because I'm a life to grief coach, sometimes I coach people that are dealing with divorce, because it's like the death of their marriage, and they have to grieve that. The way that I dealt with grieving for my daughter, and that I'm always going to be dealing with the loss of my daughter, and then my parents very close, just within days of each other, about a month of each other. I think that I'm very positive, and I keep having to remind myself I'm a strong person, I'm a positive person, and that is because I trust God. And I am a forgiven person, and I'm forgiven, I believe, even though I'm a divorced woman. But part of the reason why I feel led to talk today is because when I think about a lot of divorced families, there's such anger, there's such hatred, there's such name calling and blaming and excuses.
Which
And
some of that is normal through the grief process, right? I mean, you would, like you said, I love the way you said that. It is the death of a relationship
right,
that, and you do have to grieve it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that and don't really take it into account that you had this relationship where in God's sight you became as one flesh, but for, whatever unforeseen circumstances that was torn asunder, and there's got to be a grief there. And if you don't allow that grief, then that anger can take root and there can be a lot of bitterness. Definitely.
right. And so if you look at, in the church, there is a lot of divorce, which always shocks me when I hear this, because I'm like, why? Why are the pastors not reaching out? Why are the people in the church not reaching out to their pastors? But you know what? They are. And the pastors are reaching out too and trying to help. But sometimes people don't accept that help, or they don't
Well,
know how to accept it.
and talking about the previous uh podcast that Catherine and I did,
Yes, yes,
talking about strong women, and that was the angle that we were kind of taking it. And in the church, especially, we have noticed, and she gave statistics, that it's that matriarchal spirit that kind of takes over, where as women, a lot of times we feel entitled. And we don't want to put things in God's uh layers of authority and the way he wants things to do. I always put it like, sometimes I need to duck so God can hit my husband. I need to get down on my knees and I need to pray so that God can work on him. Because if we do it through that line of authority and God takes care of my husband's heart, and then I let my husband lead, and I influence through God's leading and the Holy Spirit on my end of it. But if I let him be the leader, it just, everything ends up working out better. Whenever I try to lead, things fall apart.
exactly. So you brought up lots of good points. When we as women try to lead, that can be a problem. Of course, we are strong women. We are leaders in, our businesses and, parenting and stuff like that.
It
But
doesn't make you not a strong woman
right,
when you put things in the proper perspective. And yeah,
exactly,
that's what Catherine and I were trying to definitely. Because I
exactly.
know just with you and your teaching and your grief ministry and everything, and I've been around some of this, the growth that you and your business have had. You are an amazingly strong woman. So, you can't say that you're not a strong woman because you have, a happy marriage now, and good relationships now. So, yeah.
Right. So we can be strong women, and yet I believe, as do you, being Christian, that there is our place, and our husband is the leader of our family. Even though we're whispering in their ears all the time, we're, giving little hints. It's always, oh, the woman's the boss, that kind of thing. When the wife is happy, then everybody's happy, and all of that. But in reality, when I think that when we um, accept our place, that we are partners, and that God is the center of us. And when you had said that when you get married, you become one flesh, of course you're going to grieve when you're divorced, because part of you physically dies, your flesh dies, your dreams, your hopes, your all of those things die. And again, as I'm speaking, I don't want anybody that is listening to you to think that I'm judgmental or accusatory or any of those kind of words. It's just that when I saw what you had written, because I read through the notes and the statistics about divorce and the number of women leading, the divorces and all of this kind of thing. I said, where God told me, you have something to say, you have something to bring hope to somebody. If there's one person out there that is suffering, or actually two, one, because I want to be able to reach out to the people who have divorced, and I believe they're forgiven. God forgives us of everything. I looked before I got on, just, what does the Bible say about divorce? And, are we forgiven? That kind of thing. And it's like, I do believe that we're forgiven, but if I could help somebody not feel the guilt that can go on for years, if I can help somebody, handle their grief a little bit better and give themselves grace, if I can help them to understand, how to help the children through it, that's one thing. The other part is to try to help a woman, or if there's a man listening, just put on the brakes. Divorce is not always the only choice. There are other things to do to build up your relationship. Now, that being said, I will tell my husband that I was on this podcast. I would have told him earlier, but we just had a busy day. One of the reasons, as you can see, my hair is wet. I was like taking a shower, hurry up in the afternoon to come here, because this is real life.
It's just been a day. Yes, it is real life.
I've been so productive, but it's like, wow, a lot going on. So I would have told him first, but the idea is I will have a great conversation with him and say that I am madly in love with my husband, Rick. We have been married for over 25 years. We have his, mine, and ours, and a lot of great times and a lot of really hard times in our lives, really hard times. Not our relationship, but everything that has come into our lives that we have worked on together. My first husband, I will say his name is Joe, and I am his friend. He is my friend, and I do love him, and he is the father of my child. And he and I have grown over these years. It was 25 plus the 2 or 3 years that I was single, to actually establish a relationship. He's friends with my husband, I'm friends with his wife, that kind of thing, because we were together for the 8 years we were married, and about 7 years before that dating in college. And well, college didn't take that long. But anyway, the point being, he is a great person. And my husband knows that he is a great person. And my ex-husband knows that my current husband's a great person. The point is, I don't want to have any of that anger, and that we were talking about with grief, that when you see people on television, and television, is it an exaggeration of life? Maybe. Is it real life? Maybe. We don't really know, but I do see it a lot.
I've seen so many instances, and I've seen both sides. I've seen instances in our community where there are, a lot of animosity, and they just can't seem to get over it. And then instances in our community where, like you said, some of the divorced couples are best friends, or seem like it. They're the great friends, and they're so supportive of their joint children. And they do, you make the best out of a situation. I think it's kind of like, and maybe this is a bad analogy, but an alcoholic, drinking is bad on some of your internal organs and your system, and that it causes consequences. So once you've quit drinking, you are forgiven. If you've asked for Jesus in your heart and you have asked him to forgive you of your sins, then you're forgiven of that, definitely. And you're not drinking anymore, and you're cleansed and you're eating good and everything. That doesn't mean you're not going to have some of those lingering consequences from that time period that are still gonna, you're gonna have to deal with. And that happens in so many areas of life, so many areas of life.
Yeah, and I was thinking that you were going to take that analogy to talk about being forgiven. And when you're divorced, or when you get the divorce, you are forgiven. But if you keep, hounding at your ex and arguing and holding back things that are, that were in the family, and I'll give you an example in a minute to explain, but you're still going to be forgiven. But you don't, but you, when you
If you
ask for
ask for it.
right.
I will put that
Yes.
there in case there's
Right.
somebody listening that
Yes.
isn't saved or doesn't understand what we're talking about. When you ask Jesus for forgiveness and you ask him into your heart, then he starts constituting a cleansing of your heart and a change in your life that makes you a better person and helps you to overcome some of these natural tendencies. It's natural for us to lash out and to be bitter and to be angry and to nag and
Yeah.
all of these things. Those are natural things that our flesh wants to do. But Jesus, that's the wonderful thing about faith. Jesus helps us to overcome those things.
Right. And that's what I was going to say, is that when you keep doing these things, you will be forgiven. But yes, you ask for that forgiveness. Well, you can keep asking and asking and asking and asking. And yes, you will be forgiven and forgiven and forgiven. But why keep doing those things? Because when you ask for forgiveness, you're really trying. It's like the alcoholic or a compulsive overeater like me. I'm really trying. So, today, I told you earlier today, it was like 7 days. Woo. Because I'm doing it for health, and I think I'm in the right mindset. But who knows what's going to be down the road. But when it comes to the idea of loving others as ourselves, why would we try to treat someone? And I can ask for forgiveness for anything I ever said at the time of divorce, because I'm sure I wasn't all sweet and candy too. But I know that for many, many, many years, most of the time that we have been divorced, we have been friends and supportive of each other for the best that we can be. And there's that heartache that will always, always be there, just like there's a grief of a child, because you're always wondering, what if, and what did we do to the child that we had, because he's hurt. But that doesn't mean I don't love my current husband. That doesn't mean that I'm saying anything bad about him, or, behind his back, or saying, oh, I wish I was still. No, that's not what I'm saying. I do believe that my life was supposed to go in this way for whatever reason. I don't know. If I,
Well, God's word says he'll turn everything to good for those who
yes,
love him. So even divorce, if you love him and you keep seeking him and seeking his word, then he will turn even our worst mistakes
right,
into a blessing in one way, shape, or form.
right, absolutely. He will do that. So there was an example of, I'm not going to go into any details because I don't want to give things away, but there was an example that I wanted to share of a couple who was in the middle of, or, the beginning of the divorce, and how right away it was all about things and money and belongings. And the one person in the relationship had everything that was going to help them with their livelihood, like sequestered, or I don't know if that's the right word, taken, locked up, whatever, until they figured out the financial part. I'm like, why? It's already paid for, it will be paid for if it's on credit. But it's like, that's the way the person is going to make money. But because the other person was so angry, that's what they wanted to do. And it wasn't like, just step back a second. Okay. If you really cannot figure out a way through counseling or coaching or prayer or the church or the Bible or God, or, God first, but whatever, If you really are going to get the divorce, then step back. You don't have to then steal or, be almost it. I mean, I know you're supposed to divide things down the middle, but to me, it's like you're stealing the person's livelihood.
Well, and I
And
think a lot of
that's
times
cruel.
that shows some root cause issues, like Catherine and I were talking about. There's just a lot on the internet and online and with the younger generation these days about toxic masculinity and how terrible the patriarch is. And we've done a couple of talks about this, and most people don't understand what the patriarch really is or should be. And they have that completely out of context, that the patriarch is man lording it over a woman. And that's not a biblical patriarchy. A biblical patriarchy is, like you said, that partnership where the man is under God, so he's basically the last word when a decision or something needs to be made, but I have just as much influence in our decisions. But whenever it comes down to it and we just can't decide if we should do something, buy a new vehicle or something big, and it's like, should we do this now? Then he's the one that decides if it's something we do right now or we're going to wait a couple of months to do it or something. It's not the end of the world. It's not him lording it over me. And they don't understand that. And they'll talk about toxic masculinity, but then they completely override toxic feminism, is basically what it is, because you're not being a feminine woman if you're trying to run the show. And I think women, because we're so nurturing and we want to take care of everybody, that we naturally end up trying to control everything. And and that doesn't work well. The more you try to control things, the more it gets away from you. And we end
Right.
up with problems. And that's where we need to make sure our toxic, part of us is, under control, that we control that instead of trying to control everybody else, and then a man's going to be less likely to become toxic if he's getting the respect and the support and the encouragement that he needs. We want him to be masculine. We want him to be the protector and the provider. But that doesn't mean we can't work. That doesn't mean we can't, help provide for the family. It doesn't mean that we can't help, that doesn't mean that we're just going to wear high heels in the kitchen, doing dishes and cooking cakes all the time.
Especially when your husband's a better cook and cleaner and everything else in my case. But when you're talking to, I think about the triangle. And if this is the husband and this is the wife and they point to God, that's the top. But the husband and the wife are equal partners. Yes, there is this, I get the hierarchy and all that, but it's kind of like my son, who is going to be graduating from boot camp next week. It's like I look at the military too. They have their levels and they all have their jobs. But the big thing is they are all broken down to work together because they're going to be saving each other's lives or not if they don't work together. And one of the things that really impressed me was that my son said that once they knew that they had finished the program, they were able to look their superiors in the eye. Before that, they always had to look down. They couldn't look at them. And that was a great equalizing event, that they could, look at the people who have been their superiors
And
and
don't
still
you
are.
think a bride kind of does that
Oh,
when you're
yes.
getting married? And for a bride, it's less that submission and training,
Right.
but it's more that shyness of going in on your wedding day and being presented to the community and to God and to your husband and changing your name.
Right.
You kind of have your eyes down in that submission, to a point. And it's not a submission that he's going to be over the top of you all the time. It's a submission that this man wants to spend the rest of his life caring for me, and I'm
Right.
going to care for him too in a different way. But one of these days we're going to be old and gray and wearing Depends and whatever it is. It doesn't look as good as what,
Yeah,
newly married couples never think of those things.
right, right. But it's true. But even, when the bride looks at the groom, or the recruit now, sailor or whatever, looks at their superior, it's that there's still a little difference, because you have to have stages of leadership and responsibility and jobs, but there's that respect, that equal kind of respect. I remember when I had gotten my master's too, the ceremony was forever, but I remember one thing, and that was walking up. It was in a big arena, and we got to walk up the ramp where the cars normally would come in to bring all the things that would be on stage and stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. This arena has a ramp. And we walked up there, and all of our professors in their gowns and their caps were there shaking our hands, because now we were equals. We had masters. A lot of them were doctors, but some of them were masters. And it's an equalizing thing, but it's a respect thing too.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that happens with couples is that when they do get married, they don't always know what they're getting themselves into. They have no idea what it's like. They just don't. It doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what education, it just doesn't. You never really know. Communication is the absolute key.
Oh,
And if
amen.
you can communicate and, just learn how to listen, and learn how to speak, and learn when not to say anything, which is really hard. My first
Really
husband, he
hard.
jokes with me still that I think about this often. He called it the wrath of PJ, meaning that when I got angry, I got angry. And I'm like, oh, I have that power. No, but that was my weakness, is that I didn't know how to quite communicate. So I would, say everything under the sun, and I'm sorry, and then do it again. It's like, why? It's,
I
um, they say, the one who's the most quiet is the one who's really right, or the one who's going to win the argument, because the other one's just talking stupid talk. But with my current husband, I realized when we had disagreements, he would get silent and I would talk. Didn't work. So I thought, finally, why don't I just get silent? Why don't I just say, I need some time off? You go get some time off. You go upstairs, I'll go downstairs, that kind of thing. When we come back, what was that argument about? I don't know. Or wasn't that funny? Or let's,
uh-huh.
and then also,
Yes.
besides the communication, the humor.
Yes. Yes.
So they say these are the things that are important.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. When Paul and I learned how to laugh at some of the silly things
Mhm.
and how to take that time, I learned to just take a walk. Instead of yelling or talking. Yeah.
Right.
Women are very verbal,
Mhm.
but it doesn't necessarily make you stronger to make somebody hear your point of view. Sometimes your strength can be in your silence and just walking away and letting them. And sometimes men, they're not as verbal. They need to think about it. They need
Mhm.
to roll it around. They need to consider what has already been said. They need to think about the situation. Their brains work differently than we do. And not all, I mean, I've seen some marriages where it's the man who's very verbal and the woman who's very quiet. So it can be either way. But yeah, you've made some excellent points here.
Well, I'm glad, because like I said, I just read what you had written and talked about, and I said, I have something to say, and
Mhm.
maybe it's going to be of value to someone, because not everybody's going to go for coaching or counseling or marriage seminars and all that stuff. But if they just take the time to take a deep breath and remember that they fell in love, and they got married, and they made a commitment, and if they can take some time to think about it before they just, reach for the lawyer and all, that would help. I mean, again, I am over the moon happy with my husband, but that doesn't mean that my first marriage was a failure, because we are still friends.
Right.
And it's sad to just think about how the pain that we had to have gone through, that we didn't have to really go through if we had if we were both aligned with Christ the same way. Not that we weren't both Christians, we were, but not the same way. I didn't have the same understanding then that I do now.
Right.
You know?
Maturity makes a huge difference,
Yeah,
doesn't it? It really
yeah,
does.
yeah.
And having an open mind. So yeah, I am so glad that you brought this up. I think it's just another aspect of the strong woman that I think the younger generation needs to hear. You know, sometimes divorce can't be, you can't help it. There are just things you didn't know about the person beforehand, or sometimes something happens that you just cannot reconcile, and unfortunately that happens. But these are just key points. If you're going to be a strong woman, then you have to heal.
Now, it's ironic, I just realized that we're having this today, and this is the day that my nephew married. In the middle of the week on a Thursday, he went to the courthouse and he married his fiancee, the love of his life for 9 years so far. And they have had a relationship. But, I'm going to share with him if ever I hear that there's ever problems, or, just the whole idea of what we learned about how to communicate and stuff. But because the younger generation is totally different than the older generation.
Definitely.
And not better, not worse. I'm not judging that way. I'm just saying that it is different. Many, many people look at marriage in a different way, either living together or not, or children or not, or whatever. They have a commitment maybe, but there's not that marriage. But, when you have the paper, it's like, okay, I think that just gives you one more reason to stop and think and, slow down and just see, what can be done, if at all anything,
Right.
you know.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so
All
much
right. Thank you.
for joining us. And your ministry, where can they find it?
I am a life coach. So Wonder and Grace Life Coaching.com is a website that I'm working on, but they can get in touch with me at my name. I don't know if you have notes for this that you put anywhere.
I will put something in the
Yeah,
description.
because it says Teacher Patricia there, but yeah, it's Patricia Patricia.J. That's where you get the PJ from. So patricia.j.pitonyak@gmail.com is where I get business email right now.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure and have that in the description. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And make sure to, if you've enjoyed this, to like, share, subscribe, all those things. And if you're interested in the Prairie Dust Trail magazine, then please hop over to prairiedusttrail.com and sign up for that. Subscribe. We're really excited about that. So thank you so much, Patricia.
All right. Thank you.